All right, I think we are all here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We're excited to share with you a bit about the clean energy transition in Michigan and what that is looking like for businesses here in the state and how you can get involved. And then we'll also hear from Harvest Solar here as to what the process looks like for getting started. So thank you, and let me jump into sharing my screen. Alrighty, so here's some of the great folks that we're going to have a chance to hear from today. As I mentioned, we have folks from Harvest Solar, as well as Covey Scenic Farm Market in Petoskey, Michigan, and Shorts Brewing in Elk Rapids as well. And this is hosted by the Great Lakes Business Network. If you're not familiar with the work that we do, we are a network of over 200 businesses in the Great Lakes region, working to create a thriving economy as well as protecting our ecosystems and natural resources. So we do this through three key pillars, which is advancing the clean economy, advocating for the shutdown of Line 5, and then promoting Great Lakes restoration. And so thank you all for coming today. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Christian with Harvest Solar to give us a bit of background on a solar journey and what that could look like.
All right, thanks, Zoe. So I'm Christian Grossbeck. I'm with Harvest Solar. I work within the commercial industrial solar projects within Michigan. I'll explain a little bit more about Harvest, but we can move forward in the slides. Really want this to be helpful for everybody on the call. So if you guys do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we can follow up at the end of that for all of the questions that the panelists have. I think we've got some time reserved for that. So real quick, talking about Harvest Solar. We've been around since around 2016. We're a family-owned Michigan-based company serving a lot of agricultural and commercial uses. We do a lot of projects across Michigan, but really across the Midwest. So I think we're licensed in a dozen states or so now. One thing about Harvest that sets us apart is that we really are a full turnkey operation. So we help through the whole entire design process. We're going through the permitting and zoning with you guys, help with the engineering. And so we're doing the design and the stamps for that. And finally, we are the construction crews and the licensed electricians to do the full process. So really from soup to nuts, we can help you through that whole entire journey, and recently added grant writing into our services. So really what I want to talk about today is give you some basics on how solar works for a business, make you guys comfortable in understanding what that process looks like. And then we can talk through a couple scenarios of what are the things we look for kind of an ideal design, and what does it look like financially for you guys to be able to look at adding solar to your business. If we have time at the end, if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to me, or we can do it at the end around anything else that you have around, misconceptions or utility structures, etc. So please, again, add anything to the chat. So it's always easier visually to kind of show what we are. So this is kind of the type of projects that we work within. So we do a lot of rural agriculture, commercial businesses. So you can see we have a lot of ground mounts. We do a lot of roof mounts, whether that's, ballasted like this or a flush mount. And we can do other projects like a carport, but really this is kind of the size of systems that we're going to be looking at, where you're, several hundred panels. What we are not, you can go to the next slide, is, looking at dense urban areas. This is really difficult to, make a project work. We're not, utility scale. We're not taking 500 acres of property to develop solar farms. And, we occasionally do residential projects, but that's not really our wheelhouse. We like to try and support businesses and offset their electricity bill on site. So just kind of a quick introduction on how solar energy works. So a solar panel, you have different charged layers, and when the sun hits it, we're essentially jumping an electron. And when we do that, we're able to borrow that in a direct current system. So that's all we're doing. We're just kind of shifting electrons around, using that current path, and using it to power our businesses and homes. So when we look at how this actually works and how it works for a home or a business, the solar panels are going to be creating direct current, but everything that we operate in our house or our business is going to be running off of AC. So there's an inverter that's hooked up in between where it comes from the grid and the meter and your home, and that's kind of the brains behind it, and that's going to control how your system operates. So this is going to take the energy you're generating and power your home. If you are generating too much power, it's going to push it back to the grid at a slightly discounted rate than retail. And if you don't have enough solar generation, then you can pull everything that you need from the grid. So this is what when we say behind the meter, or distributed generation, this is kind of the process of what this looks like. We're trying to offset the usage that you guys have at your business. One thing that I do want to say from just kind of a misconception, if the grid is down, if you don't have a battery storage, then solar doesn't work. And really the main reason for that is safety. If somebody's up on the lines working on the grid when it's down, you're producing power, it could be pushing that back onto the grid, and then you're having a live line for somebody that's working on it. So it's really more of a safety thing than an actual practical thing that we can do. So the scenarios, like I said before, we do a lot of ground mount, we can do a lot of roof mount, and then there's other options that you have around carports, agrivoltaics, battery storage. These are all within our wheelhouse of what a commercial project could look like. So really what I want to get to is, what's the financials behind solar, and is this a good business decision for you guys? So this shows the last 10 years or so, the learning curve for different energy generation. And as you can see, solar has been kind of the steepest learning curve. It has kind of plateaued out a little bit, but at the same time, when you look at wind and solar, it really is the cheapest forms of energy generation now. So when you couple that with what's best for the environment, you can see wind and solar are magnitude difference than coal and natural gas. You guys as a business are probably not going to be putting up a wind turbine at your building. So really, from that application, if you're looking for something that's environmentally and financially friendly, solar is a great option for you guys. So talking about the numbers of what a project looks like, there's a lot of great incentives out there right now. These are kind of the three main things that really move the needle for what a project looks like. So the first is the federal investment tax credit for 30%. There are some adders that we'll talk about there. There's the USDA Rural Energy for America program, the REAP grant. This has been recently changed and now up to 50% of project costs. And then on a commercial project, you are able to depreciate the system over a 5-year period. So going into details for that, the federal ITC, this is for residential and commercial, it's just a different tax form, but everything starts at 30% of a tax credit. For commercial projects, you can get additional adders. These can stack on top of it, so you can be getting 40 or 50% of a tax credit. The three categories that they have for this are energy community, which is a census tract incentive. So this is looking at employment levels and around fossil fuels and coal closures. And this is all, I'll show on the next slide in a little bit. This shows geographically if you qualify for it. If you're in that region, you don't have to do anything else besides, check some information on your tax form, you get a bonus 10%. Additionally, there's a low income, distressed and disadvantaged community map. This is also, geographic. So you just type in your address and see if you qualify. This one, though, there is a limited budget for, and that really filled up within the first several weeks. So it is an option, but it does fill up quick. And so it is hard to kind of get those additional 10%. The last thing that I think a lot of people probably hear about is an adder for domestic content. There's really two reasons why we can't approach this yet, and it's not available. The first is that there hasn't been anything from the federal level describing what the regulations are. There's no forms that you can actually fill out for this yet. Additionally, what we think those requirements might be, we're still limited on having that actual domestic manufacturing. So there's definitely a lot of push towards this, and I think in the coming year or two, we definitely could be able to take advantage of it. But right now, this isn't something that really you can apply for. A couple other things about the ITC. So the IRA really kind of bolstered this program, has extended it for another 10 years, so it's good through 2032. And a couple things that help a lot of people that weren't previously able to utilize the ITC now can. So the first is that it's transferable. So if the way you've set up your business, you don't have tax liability, and so you can't use this offset, you can actually sell this now through a broker, or there's auction websites that we've worked with. So, you know, you're going to get a slight discount for it, but at the same time, if you have the tax credit, but you can't use it, you can sell it for 80 or 90 cents on the dollar and be able to get that cash directly then. The other thing that you can do is for people that were tax exempt businesses, you can now get a direct pay for it. So these are things like nonprofits, churches, etc., that didn't have that option. They can now take advantage of that tax credit as a direct payment. Again, I just want to clarify that I am not a tax professional. So if you are looking into this, make sure that you're talking with your own tax team to understand what makes sense for you. So the REAP grant is a big incentive that has really exploded in the last year or so. It's been around for a long time. It was originally part of the Farm Bill, and since then it's kind of been used as something that they keep funding into, and works for agriculture, but it also works for rural small business. So previously, this used to be a 25% of project cost grant. With the IRA, that has increased it up to 50% of project costs, up to $1 million. So this really has, you know, been increased heavily. They put a lot of funding into it. They've also changed it so it gets awarded quarterly now. So there's a lot more opportunity to apply. You don't have to sit and wait for, you know, a year plus to be able to see if you get it back. That being said, this has gotten kind of flooded to a degree, and it is a competitive grant. So from the September round, we're just finding out what that is. So it still does take, you know, 4 to 5 months to see if you get awarded on it, but it's still a great opportunity. So like I said, this is a competitive grant. The scoring is based out of 100 points. And so we really work with the customers to understand how can we design a system to give you the best scoring. So there's things that we can do from a design perspective, but also just looking at the situation that you're in. So some scores that, or some projects that usually score well, there's points for if you're a first time applicant, so you haven't received the grant before. You get bonus points if you're in a low income area. If you have a high offset for your project and a short payback, they add points onto it for there. So that definitely is something to take a look at. And also there's additional points if you're veteran or female owned. So we really work with our customers to understand, hey, is this something that's likely for you to get or not? We never want to tell anybody not to apply for it, but it's more of just to set the expectations of where you stand and the likelihood that you're going to get it. So starting this year, we do have internal grant writers with Harvest. And like I said, this really helps the process for us to be able to work on the design with the grant writer to be able to find the best situation. So like I said, for the tax credit and the REAP grant, a lot of these are just geographic locations. So on the right, you can see an overlay of the energy community and distress community. If you fall into any of these areas, then you're likely to get, you know, 10 or 20% extra on that. And as you can see, a lot of Northern Michigan qualifies for this. And then for the REAP grant, what they define as rural is basically anything out of metro areas. So you can see there's kind of those brown ineligible areas. As long as you're not in Metro, Detroit, Flint, Lansing, Grand Rapids, you will qualify and be able to apply for this. And you have to be small business. So as long as you're not, you know, Ford or Meyer, you're going to likely, you know, be able to take advantage of that. So you guys are probably thinking, how does this relate to my business? Is this something that would make sense for me? So want to talk through just kind of ideal scenarios and some case studies for you guys to recognize if this is something that lines up for you guys. So I work more for larger commercial projects. So when I say monthly bills to 1,000 to 20,000 plus, That's for some of bigger manufacturers, but at the same time, we do a lot where you're kind of a couple $100 to several $1,000s a month, is really the wheelhouse as a whole of where Harvest operates. So we try and build it so that majority of the solar generation is staying behind the meter, meaning you're using it on site, so you're not selling it at that small discount to back to the grid. Clearly with solar, you're going to need space to be able to put this. So having a open roof space, preferably south, at the same time, east and west is still, really viable and only losing a little bit of production. Or just having a lot of ground space. So if you're in a rural setting, having, a half acre of land is a great situation for us to do a ground mount, kind of like the photo that I have behind me. Like you saw in the previous slides of the geographic adders, being rural, definitely we've seen more benefits around, the REAP grant and potential ITC adders. And then also the last thing to touch on, and this could be its whole another hour, is looking at the different utilities and what their interconnection policies are. So, the regulated utilities, the consumers, DTE, Indiana Michigan Power, they've got great programs for this. When you get into the municipalities and co-ops, they're still great to work with, but they have kind of variations to how they approach that. And so it definitely takes a little bit more to work through. In essence of time, I can probably skip over this, but this is just kind of showing how we look at for a solar design, the space, the usage, your equipment, and that utility structure. So really, I want to showcase to people, what does this look like in application? So here's two different systems that we've kind of mocked up to look at. So on the left, you can see this is a manufacturing facility. They've got a pretty big bill. They're spending about 15 grand a month with consumers. So for a system like this, on that south-facing roof, we can put a 200 kilowatt system on there. They're in an energy community, so they get 40% tax credit and they get the 5-year depreciation. So with that, even though this is a big capital project and they're about $600,000 for it, even without the REAP grant, you can see this is a 5.8-year payback. So we see a lot of commercial projects kind of in that 5 to 7 year payback, even without the REAP grant. So for a system that's going to last 30 plus years, still really financially viable. You can see at the bottom there, the LCOE, which is the levelized cost of electricity. That's taking what the total cost of the project is over your annual savings. This is what essentially you're paying for your electricity. On consumers, we see a lot of times, you're at 14, 16 cents a kilowatt hour. In this case, you're producing all of your energy at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's equivalent of saying, I'm going to buy the next 30 years of my gasoline at $1 a gallon, essentially. So you can see on the other side that this is another scenario. Their roof is older, and so, but they had space below it. So we put some ground mounts below their facility. With them, it's a little bit smaller system. They did get the REAP grant in this case. And so when you look at that for a $350,000 project, they're looking at a couple of year payback there. So again, you can see that LCOE, that cost of electricity, they're down to 2 cents a kilowatt hour, which if you get the REAP grant, we definitely see a lot of projects in that few cents. So this is just kind of showcasing from Harvest Solar's perspective, what we can provide back. This is just kind of like a preliminary assessment for a facility. If we get an electric bill, we can take a look at this and give you a one-pager essentially showing you what this would look like for your facility, how much are you offsetting, what's the payback, and what's the cost of it, just to give you a frame of reference of, hey, is this viable for me or not? The last thing that I want to note is that every scenario is different, and we hear a lot a neighbor saying, well, I looked into solar and it didn't work for me, it's not going to work for you. So this is a little bit of an eye chart with a lot of data in here, but this is looking at a single project, and you can see on the left side taking different variations. So if you're if you're on consumers, or if you're on a co-op, if you're on a demand rate, if you offset more of your electricity, all these different scenarios that you go through. You look on the far right, if you go to the payback of that, this is the same building, the same usage, just different scenarios. You can get anywhere from a 6.5 year payback to an 11.5 year payback. So it really just depends on the situation that you guys are in. So it's always good just to evaluate specifically for what you have going on, can solar work? So I wanted to make sure we left enough time for Tyler and David to talk about their own systems and their how they've been able to work through solar at their facilities. So appreciate the time and thanks everybody for listening in. And I can answer some questions at the conclusion of the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. That was great. All right, I'll pass it over to you, Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm the COO of Shorts Brewing Company. I oversee a lot of capital expenditure products there, and do all sorts of sustainability activities as well. This is a picture of our solar array we installed about 9 years ago. At that time, the REAP wasn't as expansive as it is now, but it still worked out great for us. We installed a 39.4 kilowatt solar array, and it produces a pretty darn good amount of energy, as you can see from the savings per year off our bills directly. And our initial cost was about $140,000 with the investment tax credit, sorry, in the REAP grant. Our final out of pocket was about 65,000, and the ROI was about 8.5 years at the time. That being said, we did finance the project, the remainder of that cost over about 7 years. So really, what we did is we swapped our cost for the project for energy expenses for a payment on loan. So really, it didn't affect our finances at all, which is kind of wild to think that you can do that. And then after that period of paying the loan, everything after that is gravy. So we're in that period now where the loan's paid, which is great. And we have about 20 more years of expected life of the panels for them to just keep chugging along, saving us $7,600 a year. That's pretty great. So over the next 21 years, we're expecting about $160,000 in savings, which is pretty rad. That's kind of the basic idea around our system. We, at the time when we installed it, needed a lot of help writing the grant, and I think that's really nice that people offer that in-house now. When we were tackling that originally, I remember helping to prepare that grant, and that was really fun. So that is an excellent feature if you can find someone to help you with that. And I'm assuming the paperwork is a little more streamlined now that everyone understands that solar is viable and a good solution. I think at the time it was a little bit different opinions flying around. Yeah, that's kind of our idea. And then he mentioned earlier that consumers' energy can be easier to work with sometimes than a co-op. I don't have any familiarity with that, but consumers was really easy to work with us on our project, especially because 100% of the output of our solar array is gobbled up by our gigantic chilling equipment to keep our beer cold. So never once have I seen a single nickel go back to the consumer's grid. It's all been used up in-house, keeping our beer fermentations controlled, as well as our wastewater treatment plant blowers operating. So we have a constant load all the time, and it makes it easy for us to do projects like this because we never have to worry about selling back to the grid at a discounted rate.
Tyler, I just have one question before we go to Covview Farm. I'm curious, are you maxed out at solar capacity with the space that you have on property?
We are not. As you can see, we have a big white portion of roof there that is not covered. We always are trying to play defense for our future crazy ideas. So we put the panels in a specific spot of our roof so that we didn't have to worry about it later when we wanted to tear everything down and redo a whole bunch of the brewery. So we have a ton of space actually available. I would say it's probably about 7/8 of our footprint is not covered with solar panels at this time, and a lot of that is south-facing roofs. So that's nice. So in the future, we might be applying for grants to do some more projects there, and I'm hoping to do that in the next couple of years, as long as the REAP grant sticks around at the current rate.
Awesome. Good to hear. It's always exciting. Well, thank you for the insights there.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And now David from Covey Farms.
Yeah. Thank you. So it's great to be here. Yeah, I want to share a little bit for our farm why we went to solar, and I think it may be applicable to a lot of farmers who may be on the call listening. And it's really this move to electric. So we're one of these old family farms. We're basically a vegetable farm growing produce, and with that, we need a lot of things that go with that. So refrigeration is one. We're growing vegetables. We're growing spring and fall flowers. And then a retail market that has display coolers or display freezers, that load that is there just seasonally in the summertime, but it's not running now. We're a seasonal market, and then the farm itself. So you want to flip to the next slide here. We moved all of our walk-in coolers. We have 3 walk-in coolers for produce chilling. We moved all of those to geothermal a good number of years ago. So that just really helped us, again, focus on taking costs out of our system. Being a farm, to be profitable up here, we really have to be operating at our lowest cost possible. And geothermal, for all of our chilling, significantly helped us drop our operating costs. But geothermal runs on electricity. So we kind of get the benefit of both movements there by really moving more in that geothermal space as well as chilling. And on the next slide, you'll see that we even moved to this greenhouse. This is a 5,000 square foot greenhouse. We grow all of our vegetable transplants we put into our fields here. And then we're growing salad greens in the wintertime for years. And this, we also moved from propane to geothermal. So it's moving away from propane and gas as we see it to electricity-based systems. And again, geothermal heating allows us to do that much more cost effectively. And then geothermal still runs on electricity. So it's kind of taking 4 or 5 times the BTU power and moving it into the ground and burning it in something. So here again, we're moving our farm from some of these old conventional uses we had before to electric. And on the next slide, you can kind of see a little more. We're basically a transplant focused farm. We do a ton of irrigation, all drip now. We moved our gas irrigation pump from a surface pond to a variable frequency drive electric pump. Again, for cost reasons mostly. This pump is crazy efficient compared to our pouring gas or filling this gas tank continuously. And we've got 50 miles of drip tubing that we pump water through every day in the summertime. And this move to electric seems to be the direction we're going as a farm. And with that then comes what was the next step would be solar. And it just made sense for us. It was 10, 12 years ago. We put a 20 kilowatt net metered array on our farm. As a farm, we've got 300 plus acres. We got lots of land that isn't in production, and we can put the solar arrays relatively easily. This one we put in, and it works really well for us. From March through October, I was kind of amazed at actually how much production it has. It's south-facing, fixed ground mount, kind of a 40-degree slant to the south. These are old. This is 12-year-old technology, or 10-year-old technology. So I think my array would be just a little over half the size to get the same output now. The probably underappreciation I had is how quickly this technology has evolved, both from a cost standpoint and a physical size. So to get the same output, I need just a little over half as many panels as I was putting it in today as before. I went with microinverters, which are an inverter converting DC to AC on each panel, thinking that if there's some snow or something hung up on the end, it would impact the total production of the array. And then I'm an engineer at heart, so I also like to be able to see every panel's production every day. If you want to, if you wanted to look at it, you can actually tell what the whole system is doing on every panel. So I'm using Enphase microinverters. Iron Ridge racking, again, this is the old 4-inch steel. It's the cost and what they're putting in now is way better and less expensive than what it was, a dozen years ago. I've never had to move snow off the array. It just slides off, the sun comes out, and a couple hours later, it's all slid off at 40 degrees. No maintenance. I've never washed the thing in northern Michigan. We get enough rain that I've never had to wash it. I've washed it a couple times and I couldn't tell any difference looking at the microinverter data to see that it's any better, significantly different. It's been really robust as well. Over these dozen years, I had 2 microinverters fail. Put them in online and they mailed me new ones, so under warranty, and it really has been solid. So I'm net metered, which means and I'm seasonal, so my energy demand fluctuates quite a bit. So when I'm generating more electricity than I'm using on the farm, it goes back out through my meter and spins my meter literally backwards, counts down, and then when I'm at night, I'm just pulling off the array or off the grid, just like anyone else would be. I have no batteries tied to it, and it works really well. So realistically for me, I don't pay a bill until probably July. So I'm kind of banking those hours. I don't get paid for my co-op. I'm with a co-op. So it shows up as a credit on my bill until I use it in the summertime when I have peak loads. This net metering program is one that it doesn't pay you dollars. So you can't really use net metering to make money off of the array from my standpoint, but it does offset your usage. That's really the purpose of it. So the federal tax credit and the REAP grant are the 2 that would apply for my array. It was 25% back then. Now it's 50% for the REAP. So it's a huge benefit, but I can't speak to it enough as to how impressed with how much production there is in northern Michigan. And just for my array, just a little side note here real quick, is the electricians wired it all in and they put in 60 amp breakers for each leg of the 240, and it started blowing those 60 amp breakers because it really needed to be more like 90 amps for something that's this small. So there's a lot of power that comes out of these things, and you wouldn't think of it being that beneficial, but in northern Michigan, they work, from my testament, very, very well, and I recommend anyone to look into them to explore more if it makes sense for them. So that's a little bit what I had to share, just as a real world example here in northern Michigan.
We love to hear a good solar success story. So thank you for sharing. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley Radzinski. She's the Climate and Environment Program Director with the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities, as well as the Great Lakes Business Co-Director. And she's just going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the advocacy space around solar and clean energy as well.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Zoe. And thanks to all of our panelists today. This was such a really helpful presentation to help us better understand, not only how to implement solar, but how it's already being done in our community. So thanks to each of you. Really this morning, I'm excited to share with you a link to our ambition petition, which is targeted at President Biden. And Zoe just threw it in the chat for you all. And this petition really aims to encourage the president and his EPA to finalize and implement the strongest possible pollution standards aimed at the power sector by May of 2024 to help ensure that we meet the administration's climate, public health, and environmental justice goals. In recent weeks, the EPA did finalize the soot rules, so you may have seen some news about that. And we know that mercury and air toxics rules are on the horizon. There are still others like methane and the carbon rules that we are hoping are coming soon, but we haven't seen as much traction there as we would like so far. And for us, this really is the flip side of the coin of what you've heard about today. Obviously, Great Lakes Business Network really remains committed to fostering a rapid and just transition to renewable energy. But we recognize that implementation is taking time and taking more time in some ways than we would like. And so during that interim, we know that we've got a responsibility to protect communities from the pollution that stems from continued fossil fuel use. And we know that the impact of air pollution and climate pollution on both our public health and our economy has been really damaging. In just the first half of last year, so from about January to July of 2023, we had 15 confirmed climate disaster events costing more than $1 billion in economic losses in the United States. So that's according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So we're hopeful that as you explore solar for both your business or your home, you'll also consider sending a quick note to the president just to encourage finalization of these important standards this spring, because the clock is ticking and they are also incredibly important for us to be able to tackle climate change in a real way. So thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. We appreciate the insight there as to what's going on behind the scenes as well. At this time, we're ready to jump to the Q&A section, and I know there's been quite a few questions already answered in the Q&A. But Christian, do you just want to clarify the scope of region that you all work within?
Yeah, so we're headquarters in Jackson, Michigan, but do a lot of work throughout the Midwest, and we have another office down in Illinois. So we take projects in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Iowa, kind of all over the Midwest.
Okay, great. Love to hear that. And then I did answer this question as well, but the slide deck and this presentation recording will be shared out. We have some additional slides with additional information that just didn't quite fit into this, so there'll be even more there if you're really enthused to look at that. And then we had a gentleman asking about RECs, and I'm just wondering if we could expand on that conversation a little bit and how RECs play into solar systems.
Yeah, so it really varies state by state. So Michigan doesn't really have its own REC program. Really what it means is that in certain areas in Michigan, you can participate in Ohio's REC program. So it really isn't something that is a huge incentive within the state here. But other states around the Midwest, Illinois in particular, has a great solar REC program. The state essentially pays you up front for what you would projected to generate. So it really varies place by place. Michigan just isn't that great for it. But to answer the question also, how can it be monetized, is that our projects come with revenue grade metering. If it's smaller, then it might not. So that's something to look at. But that would allow you guys to register your systems to be able to track what you produce, to be able to have it put into the system and qualified to sell as RECs.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Tyler and Dave, maybe we can circle back to you all. Someone was asking about, has the decline in panel performance matched the predictions? And if you could just speak a little bit to what those predictions looked like, and then what does that decline look like in real life?
I guess I can add in. I don't know that I've looked exactly to track the degradation, because solar panels will degrade, the output will degrade as years go on. But I don't think it's too far off of the expectation. There is some degradation. The one thing I think that's underappreciated is the opposite, which is in the springtime, especially March and April, when it's really cold outside and it's sunny, how much more we get out of these solar panels than are anticipated. And then because that's when solar panels put out more, is an inverse proportion to temperature. So the colder it is, the more efficient they are. And ironically, and then when it's hot out, you get less out of a panel. So the interesting is here in northern Michigan on these cold March, April days, these panels you really put out more than is usually modeled, because it's not you're taking into account that cold temperatures compared to somebody in Arizona or Florida or something you'd think is a solar state. So that's another part of that modeling that you have to kind of factor in. And Christian may be able to comment more on that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, you hit it on perfect. I mean, panels typically lose about 1/3% of production for every degree it increases. So if you imagine, you're down in Florida and you're up at 100 degrees, your panels are 110 degrees, you're plus 40 degrees, you're losing, 15% efficiency on the panels. So you're spot on with that. They like those sunny kind of 60-degree, 50-degree days to really produce a lot of electricity.
And the days that it's like today, where it's sunny and 20, it's even better. Yeah, that's where that relationship I've just observed is kind of not intuitively obvious.
Yeah, we've been having a great February so far. I'm same as you. I've got a system on my house and with unphased inverters, and I'm constantly on my phone looking at it. And these sunny February days has definitely been producing more than I've been consuming because I'm also not running any air conditioning right now, so I don't have much load in my house in February.
Right, right.
All right, we had one other question come in from Tara, and she was asking, do the REAP or other grants consider the level of energy and efficiency improvements you have done at your business before they consider funding solar panels? And Christian, I know this is something we've talked about before. You know, they kind of go hand in hand, so I think you can take that one.
Yeah, so I'm guessing in this you're saying I've already done other projects. Is that going to affect my situation with the REAP? The answer for that is no. It's looking specifically at the solar project itself. So you're going to be scored on what you're offsetting from your bill. So the only way that it potentially could affect it is that if you've already done a lot of things to reduce your electricity bills, you're not going to get, as much of an offset or as much of a payback on it. But in a broad sense, no, it's going to be looking specifically just at that solar project in isolation.
I might add something in here. If someone's looking to do energy efficiency work as well as generation work, because the REAP has this energy efficiency component. But the other part that I stumbled on a number of years ago is that most of the utilities, especially for businesses, have this energy efficiency component as well. So you're trying to improve the efficiency of your business. The utilities is another pool of money that will incentivize you to make your systems more efficient. And some of those dollars are pretty significant. They're even more than the REAP back when I was looking at it for some of the things we were doing here. So to really reach out to your utility to explore the financial incentives to improve performance in your systems is worth it, because they can be many thousands of dollars available for businesses.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation that's happening a lot. I know specifically in the legislation around increasing energy efficiency and then offsetting the energy use that's left afterwards. So it's certainly on our policy radars as well. We have a few questions. One is from George. So how would they go about getting an evaluation for their business? Will someone reach out or should they reach out?
I mean, George, I just wrote your name down so I can reach out, but on the slides, our contact information's on there, and I put it in one of the previous questions, my email and phone as well.
Great, and I'll share that slide here as well with everyone's contact information. Sam is asking, do many or any of the businesses with solar go the extra step to become carbon neutral?
I think it's case by case on this. I mean, as you can see, David's gone through the journey of really electrifying a lot of things and offsetting with solar. And, to the other conversation around other efficiency projects, there's a lot that can be done around, insulation and just reducing your overall usage. We do install solar and we do produce solar electricity at the same time. To fight against this, the best thing is just to use less energy. So there are a lot of other things that we see customers doing on top of solar to be able to reduce their overhead, reduce their financial burden, as well as, be more environmentally friendly.
I mean, I would add it. This is like a continuous evolution. It's like you're continually moving the ball forward. And for us, we're removing propane because we want to get to lower operating costs. I'm removing my gas irrigation pump because I want to get to lower operating costs. But at the same time, I'm also becoming much greener in doing that as well. So it's one of the few times where removing fossil fuels and carbon is actually beneficial to the bottom line, and it wasn't always that way, years ago. And so but it's like for us on our farm, it's just there's so many different systems. We just keep working to improve all of them going forward, and so I would say from that standpoint, we're moving to be more carbon neutral. But it takes time to get there.
Great. And then last question I'm seeing at the moment is from Tara, and she's just wondering if there's a cost for a solar evaluation from Harvest. It sounds like they have a nonprofit.
Yeah, there's no cost from our side to come out and do a site assessment and take a look at what you guys are working with. Easiest thing to get started to get kind of that one pager that I showed is just to send over an electricity bill. It's amazing the technology that's out there now. So I mean, with Google Earth and LiDAR across, you know, the Midwest, we're able to really see a lot before getting out on site.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I didn't really consider how much of this could probably be done virtually, so that's pretty neat with modern technology. And in case anyone is looking for contact information, you can find it here on the slide. But I want to make one last call for any pending questions. You can drop them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I think we had a really amazing conversation here today, and we appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I guess one last thing I want to note, David kind of mentioned this earlier, saying that I think it was 265 watt panels you have. Our typical panels we do now for a ground mount are 540 watts. So you're right, we're the same footprint. We're essentially able to double the output for that. And a cool thing that's really kind of taken the industry the last several years is that for these ground mounts, they actually are bifacial. You realize that the backside of the panel is also still getting some light. And so from a ground mount, we do see like 5 or 10% additional production on top of these much larger producing panels. So the technology has evolved quite a bit, unfortunately, since David put his in. So there are a lot of great systems out there. And one other misconception is that, you know, we're talking about the temperature and how, you know, colder temperatures actually provide better production. People always say, well, this is in Arizona, so this isn't going to work. In Arizona versus Michigan, you know, we're only getting 20% less solar irradiance, but in Michigan, we have some of the highest electricity rates in the country, and it's usually 20% higher. So really financially, it's about a wash there. So I know I'm speaking directly about Michigan. I know there's other people that are on Duke and other utilities throughout the Midwest. You know, and those scenarios still definitely work as well. You know, you don't have to be in a southern sunny state in order for this to work.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all. And if we get any other questions from participants, we'll make sure to pass them on. But we will be sharing this out for folks who registered, so you'll see some follow-up there. Thank you, Christian, Tyler, Dave. We appreciate all of the insights and hearing success stories from you all in this region. And always feel free to reach out. So we hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks for attending.
Thanks all.
Thank you.